Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Ryan Murray, and I am the Executive Director of the Washington Association of Child Advocate Programs. And you are our newest class of volunteers or potential volunteers to be child advocates. So thank you all for showing up this morning. I hope you all had a relatively cool weekend. It was even hot over here, so in Seattle. So wherever you are, I think all of Washington was under a heat advisory, or at least it probably felt that way. Anyway, thank you for giving up part of your June to do this training and spending the next 30 hours or so with all of us to become a child advocate. My name is Ryan. I've been doing this work I've been in child welfare for about 25 years now. Um, yeah, got a master's degree in public or organizational development. I've got a minor in geology. So yes, very relevant to the field of child welfare. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So, a couple things, just kind of setting up this training space for us all. I'm going to put you all on mute. So, again, thank you for joining this training. Again, it's so beautiful. I can't believe anybody would want to spend 30 hours watching their computer screen in this beautiful weather that we're having. But anyway, I appreciate it. And the kids will too, and the families. So, thank you. Logistics. Okay. Y'all found the Zoom link. This is the same Zoom link we're going to be using through all 4 weeks of this training. It is the same link for both the evening and morning classes. So just so you know, there's not a separate one. They're all under the same link. Um, I will start promptly at 10 o'clock each day or 5:30 if you're coming in the evening. I will generally use the full 2 hours, right? So don't, we've got a lot of material to cover. Every once in a while, I'll let you go a little bit early, but that's usually the exception and not the norm. Couple of other things. There's not going to be any breaks, right? Because we're just doing this for 2 hours. So do what you need to do. If you do have an interruption or something like that, that's fine. Just turn yourself off, turn the camera off or whatever, turn your microphone off and go attend to it. And then come back and join us. You don't need to tell me, oh, I'm leaving. Just go. It's fine. Couple of other things. All of these training sessions, both the afternoon and the morning classes, will be recorded. And then I'll be sharing with you a private link for YouTube so that you can go back and watch any of the classes you missed, or just want to hear back and hear something that you may have missed because you answered the phone or something. Totally okay. You can always go back and watch those videos. And yeah, I think that's all I want to say about that. If you need to miss a session, please check with your program coordinator or the person that you've been working with about making up that session. Most of the time, it's okay if you just watch the videos, but please let your coordinator know if you can't make a session. I don't formally take attendance for these things, and I'll explain why. But the idea is it's your responsibility to let your coordinator know when you're there or when you're not there, just like you were if you weren't going to be able to go to court or something like that. Like it's on you to let your coordinator know what you've missed or what you haven't missed. So please check in with them. Likewise, you don't need to let me know if you're not going to be present. I don't really care. That is between you and your coordinator. I am just facilitating a training. Okay. So they're the ones that are ultimately going to be responsible for making sure that you're getting all the knowledge and information that you need in order to do this work. So don't need to tell me. Couple of other things. Please keep yourself on mute unless you are speaking. Everybody's microphones picks up on all kinds of random things. I can hear you sniffling. I can hear you laughing. I can hear you chewing, which is really annoying. But anyway, please keep yourself on mute. It's fine if you're going to eat. I don't care. Just don't chew in my ear, please. And my girlfriend would say the same thing. So I do not like that. So other than that, we're okay. Your name. So many of you already have this, but what I'd like you to do is make sure your name reflects who you are, so your first and last name, and then what county you're going to be volunteering in. And so if you haven't done so already, there's a couple ways you can do this. The easiest I've found is that if you just hover over your picture and then click the three dots in the upper right-hand corner of your picture, about 2/3, or in my case, all the way down, you'll see a function that says rename. Click on that, and then it'll show what's showing up in the box. So take a minute and do that if you haven't done so already. Anybody still having difficulty with that?
Yes, Melody is.
Okay, Melody. Did you find your name?
I did. I turned the video off to thinking maybe that would let me pull the picture up, but it's not
Nope.
cooperating.
Do you see the three dots?
No, sir.
When
There
you
are
have,
no
are you on your phone or computer?
iPad.
Oh, that's probably why.
I
Yeah,
know.
iPad controls are a little different. I'll just do it for you. What county are you in?
Spokane.
Perfect.
Last name Smith.
I could have guessed that, Melody. Joking.
Well, you never know.
Okay. There we go.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Looking good. Okay. The other thing I want to let you know too, is that anybody that has an asterisk at the start of their name, they're staff, so they know what they're talking about. And Julie, I'm going to change yours right now. There you are. So these are people who are coordinators from other parts of the country or state, but they pop in periodically just to keep an eye on what just happened. Ooh, hit the wrong button. They keep an eye on you and me to make sure that you guys are all getting the information that you need. So,
Ryan, I don't have my county.
oh, what's your county, Michelle?
It's Spokane.
Okay. Rename. Let's put that there too.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else? There we go. Okay. Excellent. Couple of other things that we do. So every morning when you log in or when I invite you back into the Zoom room, I'm going to ask you to please put something in chat. That is one of the ways that we take attendance for these sessions. So now I'd like you to put something in chat. You could say good morning. You could say hello. You could say greetings. But whatever, put something in chat. So if you're looking for it, there's a little icon with two little dialogue things. So please take a moment and utilize the chat. Everybody able to find the chat? This is also a good place to put questions, although this is kind of a smaller class, so usually I don't mind the, hey, I've got a question type of a thing. But if you've got something, and I'm like mid-flow in terms of doing the training, just put the question in chat and then I'll get back to it. Or sometimes the staff will answer those questions as well while they're in there. So feel free to use the chat for questions. I try to keep the chat up. I don't always get to it. I don't always see it. That's why I rely on the staff to kind of help out with that too. And just let me know if there's something, a question that needs to be answered for the benefit of all. So. Good so far? For any of you, is this your first time using Zoom? Well, welcome to the 21st century. Feel I live on Zoom. Okay. So what to expect during this training. I am not going to lie. Oh, wait, I'll start with this first. This is a ongoing high degree. Expect a high degree of interaction during this class. This is not going to be something that you can just pop. It's not a podcast, right? You can't just pop your AirPods. You can't just pop your AirPods in and then, fold laundry or make breakfast or whatever it is you want to do. Because I'm going to be putting you in breakout rooms. I'm going to be asking you to answer questions. You're going to be talking with one another a lot. So just expect that. This is not one of those just sit and get types of trainings. If that were the case, I'd just give you a big list of YouTube videos to go watch, and then you'd go maybe watch them and then come back. So just expect that for the full 2 hours, right? You're going to be talking with each other, talking with me, doing stuff. We've got a couple of videos that we'll be, well, lots of videos that we'll be watching throughout, but then we'll also be discussing those afterwards. So please expect that. Challenging material. I cannot underscore this enough. We are going to be working with families that have gone through a lot. You don't just accidentally find yourself in the dependency system. Kids don't, nor do their parents, nor do their families. And with all of that comes a lot of, I mean, you think of any societal or social ill that's out there, chances are our families are going to be impacted by that. And part of the responsibility of being a guardian ad litem is having an understanding of that and being able to work through those issues, not just with the families, but for you, right? We're going to be talking about people and families who are addicted to something or else, right? We're going to be talking about domestic violence. We're going to be talking about race. We're going to be talking about LGBTQ issues. We're going to be like the whole thing is going to be there, right? And so part of your role of being a guardian ad litem is being able to take that information in and be able to understand what the court expects of you in terms of giving that information back. I guarantee you at some point, you will be challenged by what we're telling you and thinking, that's not how I think the world should work. That's great. However, the court has expectations of you of how it needs the world to work. And so we're going to be explaining this to you, giving you the background and having hopefully an understanding of why the system is set up the way that it is. And we need you to be able to perform and listen and all of those things in order to be an effective advocate for kids. We'll be going over that a lot, but I'm going to tell you right now, one of the best skills that you can have as a guardian ad litem is being able to listen. So much of your work is going to be taking information in and being able to listen, and then being able to report that back to the court. There will be some homework, mostly reading, throughout, but given that we're spending 30 hours together, I tried to limit the amount of homework. So most of the homework is just, here, read this article and come to class, be prepared to discuss it tomorrow. There's one video I'm going to ask you to watch about substance abuse and recovery. There's an article from a law review talking about this program itself that's pretty lengthy. I'm going to ask you to read that and be able to comment and talk about it in class. And there's I have you write an email, just little things like that, right? And I usually try to schedule those so that Thursday or, Wednesday or Thursday, I give you the weekend to be able to complete it so that on Monday when we come back. So I've got it kind of set up now that we can do it that way. So there's not going to be read this tomorrow, read this 50-page document, and then be prepared to discuss it tomorrow. Nothing like that. So, but there will be some homework that I ask you to complete. The other thing, just so you know too, we will not be having class on Juneteenth. So June 19th is when we're observing Juneteenth this year. So that's a Thursday, which also means that we will be going. Usually, I end these on the last Wednesday, but because we have a holiday, we have to extend that to the last Thursday of the 4 weeks, which is July 3rd. So we squeeze this right in before the holiday weekend. So parking lot. Sometimes, just so you know, I got to keep this ball rolling, right? And so sometimes we'll find ourselves going down into little rabbit holes of this topic or that topic. I'm just going to tell you, sometimes I'm going to have to reserve the right and be like, hey, we got to move on, guys, right? Like, we don't have enough time. We got to keep going. So if that happens, feel free to use the chat to kind of finish your thought or put whatever it is in there. We'll try to come back to it if we have time, but just know that sometimes I got to move this train along. Alphabet soup. Dependency is a technical profession. And so we use a lot of acronyms. And some of the acronyms are silly, but we're not using them to try to show you how smart we are, that we can take the first letter of a series of words and make a word out of those letters. But no, it's just shorthand. Just like I'm sure if I were to follow you around for a day in your profession, I'd hear all kinds of acronyms that I'm like, what does that mean? I have no idea. I've never heard that. So we use them. And if you ever hear me use an acronym or somebody else use an acronym that you're not sure about, ask. That's great. I've been doing this for 25 years. I still hear acronyms that I don't know what they mean. And so I used to be like, I'm not going to ask because I'm afraid of looking stupid and not knowing what that acronym means. Now that I'm on the other side of my career, it's like, nope, I need to know what that means if somebody's using it. So I encourage you to do the same. Ask if somebody says something that you're not sure or what an acronym is. Ask, put it in chat, raise your hand, whatever, so that we can fix that. And then laugh when we can't even remember what the acronym stands for anymore. So that's what happens. Finally, at least on this slide, I want you to know too that this training is an ongoing evaluation process, right? So we're going to be watching, kind of keeping an eye on things, making sure you've got the right kind of approach and attitude going into this. Just like we want you to evaluate us and make sure this is going to be a good fit for you as well, right? So I'm going to be telling you, this is how we do things. This is what we do. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're looking to form a lifelong bond with the child that you're going to be an advocate for, this isn't the job. This isn't the right one for you. And we'll explain what that looks like as we go on. This is not like big brothers, big sisters, or a mentor, mentee type of relationship. This is what we're doing here is making sure kids can get home, right? And that we get out of their lives so that they can go on and be kids. So, and I usually have people that drop out about a week into this and be like, whoa, I didn't know there was going to be all this court stuff. Like, yeah, like that's what we do. So it's okay. But just let your coordinator know if you need to leave and why. That way we can adjust our recruitment materials to make sure that we're getting the right people in this training. So any questions about any of the things on this slide before we move on to the next? Anyone? Oh, well, great. Let's do some introductions then. I'm going to break you up into pairs in just a moment. And then what I want you to do is introduce yourself to your partner. Who you are, what you do, where you're from, pet names, I don't know. But one of the other things that I really want you to address is why you chose to take this training or why you chose to become an advocate. Your partner just so you know, is going to be the one introducing you to the rest of us. So give them some good stuff. Make sure they're getting it all down, right? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to talk, 3 minutes, and then I'll say, hey, okay, switch. And then in your little group or your little pair, switch, and then take turns, basically take turn introducing yourself to your partner. So then that way, when we come back to the big group, you can introduce your partner successfully. I'm setting up the breakout rooms now, but while I'm doing this, any questions? All right. I will see you all in about 6 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Who would like to introduce their partner to the group?
I'll start.
Okay.
So I had Kelsey, and she actually is a visitation supervisor for Clark and Cowlitz County. So she's got some experience with working with dependency youth there. She also stated that she herself was a foster child for about 4 years and was blessed to be able to go live with family after that. And so we talked a little bit about how that could be biases, and so that'll be a good lesson when you get to that, Ryan, in good ways and bad ways. So that's about Kelsey.
Thank you, Nikki. Kelsey, do you want to introduce Nikki?
Sure. Nikki is an advocate supervisor. We talked about her degree background. She was actually a social worker for 3 years in Bremerton, and it was not the right fit for her. The department is a hard job to have, so I totally understand that. She also worked in schools for 30 years, so she has a lot of experience with children. And then she went on to become a treatment counselor, and she loves working with advocates, so that's why she's here now, and she retires soon. So she sounds very knowledgeable.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Next pair.
Me and Terry will go.
Okay.
Um, so Terry is from the Tacoma area. She is retired and from a business background. She is wanting to be an advocate because she wants to give back. And this is a very good program to keep herself busy, especially with the reuniting the families. So,
Thank you.
Terry.
Your turn, Terry.
Hi, I met Jeannie, and she is graduating from school and have a criminal background, and she is finding that it would be a very good way to spend her leisure time. Can't talk this morning, and that she is from the Spokane area, and she feels as though it's really needed out there as well. That's about it.
Great. Thank you. Next pair.
I'll go.
Thank you, McKenna.
Yes. I had Casey, and she is from Clark County in Vancouver, and she got her degree in psychology and addiction studies from WSU. And she's doing this training and advocacy because psychology is a broad field for her, and she's kind of trying to find where she fits in with what she wants to do. I asked her what specifically got her into addiction studies, because that's kind of a pretty specific minor. And she said some of her family has dealt with addiction. So this is probably a good experience for her too, kind of seeing what that looks like with children and families as well.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Casey, you want to introduce McKenna?
Yeah, so my partner was McKenna. She's from the Tacoma area. Originally, she got her undergrad degree in sports management, and from that, she kind of found this love with working with kids. And so I believe she's kind of taking this opportunity with the advocate program to kind of see where, like within the criminal justice system, this can kind of take her. And just she has a passion for working for kids, so it was a perfect opportunity.
Great. Thank you. Who's next?
I can go.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
So I was partnered with Jordan, and she recently got her BA and is preparing to apply to grad school in the fall. And so while she's kind of in that transition period, she's working on getting this certification because hopefully it can help with those applications a little bit. And is just really passionate about helping kids.
Great. Thank you. Jordan, tell us about Rebecca.
So Rebecca is from Pierce County. She recently got her BA degree, I think, as well. Right now she's an intern at a juvenile court. She thinks that the work is really important and she wants to take the tools that she can learn here to achieve social justice for the kids. And she wants to be a lawyer in the future.
Cool. Next group.
Kat, should we do it?
Go ahead, Joanna.
Okay. I'm Joanna, and I met Kat Carlson. I'm so sorry. And she's from the Port Angeles area. She was almost in foster care herself, except that her grandmother was able to step in and take care of her, and she's really grateful for that. But because of that, she feels like she wants to help kids that are in similar situations. She feels like she can identify with them. She really likes kids a lot. She's somebody who takes care of other people a lot. She's a home care aide, and she has 2 dogs and 3 cats.
Thank you. Kat, tell us about Joanna.
Okay, firstly, I want to apologize for the noise. I have a lot of family visiting my house right now.
No problem.
But I met Joanna. If I remember hearing her right, she said she was a tax accountant who also owns 3 cats, so fellow cat lady. She told me that she wanted to do this work because she wanted to be able to be a voice for somebody, and that while she's not naturally drawn to children, she's hoping that she can work with some teens to be able to help them out.
Well done, Kat. I don't think I would have been able to concentrate with all that noise in the background. Wow. Cool. That is a great skill to have. Okay. Next pair. Go ahead, Connie.
Okay, I had Gail, and she is from Longview. She is just retired 6 weeks ago, and she was in corporate tax preparation. She's got 10 grandkids, 7 kids combined from previous marriage, and she's got time and wants to spend that learning, giving children a voice in the community. So
Great. Thank you. Gail, tell us about Connie. Oh, it happens to all of us at one point or another, Gail. You're muted. There we go.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay. I was partnered with Connie, and she's also recently retired from a career in airline. She was a gate agent and a flight attendant, and years ago she was already a guardian ad litem between 2008 and 2013. She's from the Spokane area. She's been married 45 years. I think that's wonderful. She has 3 grown children and about 10 grandchildren, so she's returning. Very nice to meet you, Connie.
Thank you. I think we have a couple more pairs.
We do. I'll go.
Okay, Becky.
So I talked to Michelle Baxley. She is in Spokane, but she's originally from South Africa, where she did social work and pediatric and care, and then in private practice. She lived with her husband for 18 years in California, and then has been in Washington for 8 years. Her husband retired, and Spokane is his hometown, so they moved back here. She works part-time in a daycare, and a lot of those kids are in foster care, so she's seen the need. And she and I both agreed that we just cannot leave the children. We've got to step in and help the children. She has a degree in social work in South Africa and almost all the credits to a master's degree. Um, she has two daughters. One is in Okanagan, teaches first grade at Bridgeport, and the other is getting a master's in public health. I think we're really lucky to have her. How did I
Thank you.
do, Michelle?
You did great.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I met Becky. She's wonderful. She was a teacher at WSU and was teaching a human development class about 20 years ago. The students had to do outreach, and some of them joined the CASA program back then. So she's been interested in it all this year, but she's recently retired and now has the time. She feels like this job is going to be kind of tough and ugly at times, but she feels like these children really need a voice. And at the moment, she's in Paris, lucky lady. And I think that's all about Becky.
What time is it in Paris right now, Becky?
It is, I know the answer to this question. It is 7:39 p.m., which is why I'm doing the morning class today, because it would be 2:30 a.m. for the evening class.
Not bad. All right, Julie, who do you have?
Can you hear me now? I feel like the Verizon commercial. I think it was Will. I should have asked. Will, I think that's your name. Wilfredo is what he comes up on. And I guess that would have been the first question is what is your name? Will is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Will, is from Benton County. He actually currently works for Benton County. And he was doing truancy, at-risk youth, and they're kind of trying to do some cross training. So he's jumping over to the GAL guardian ad litem side. However, there's always been an interest there for him. He originally had looked into being a JL, but given, I think he was probably fresh out of college, he didn't quite have a lot of experience for that. So they hired him instead for truancy and same thing, truancy and diversion. So now he's just getting a little more experience under his belt for Benton County to be a little more diversified.
Great. Go ahead.
Had Julie. She started off more in the family law environment. It wasn't really her cup of tea. So she did really like like working with kids. So she wanted to stay in that same realm. She really likes doing the child advocacy part of GAL, and she's from the Pullman area.
Great, thank you. And is it Will or Wilfredo?
Either or. If you can't say my name, Will's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we're down to the last group, maybe.
Yeah, I can go.
Thank you.
I was partnered with Melody. She is also from the Spokane area like me. She had retired after 48 years of nursing, 12 of those years being at the county jail nursing. So she's had a lot of experience, which I think is very admirable. She wants to advocate for the kids, both supporting them and their parents.
Thank you. Melody, can you introduce Maya?
Yes. Okay, I had met Maya, also from Spokane. She is a recent WSU graduate. She holds a psych and criminal justice degree. Taking the summer off, kind of doing a little hospitality service work to probably save up more money for more school. And she did do some research for this CASA program. We're looking for something to do, and here she is.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. What a great group of folks, and what a variety of experience that you all have and are all bringing to this. This is why this program is so great. We get a wide variety of people coming in here, bringing their own kind of lens, their experience, their things that they can bring to this world of child advocacy. And it is fantastic. There is no one right path that got you here, right? all of your experiences are going to be helpful in terms of helping with others, bringing folks to the family, whether you're retired or you're just out of school, like we can use it all. And again, there's no perfect career path to this. Like you heard Julie, she was doing family law. I was doing geology, right? Like it doesn't, like we can all get there. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, there's so many other experienced people in here. No, 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 no. Right? We take all of that experience and use it. And everybody's got their own little thing. And so much of this, like I said before, is just being able to listen. I cannot stress that enough. Like very rarely are you, except to the court, but you're not going to be like pushing people to do things or things like that. You're going to be there to listen and tell the court what that court needs to hear so that the court can say, hey, don't you think it'd be a good idea if, or you talk to the social worker on the case and you tell them, hey, I was just talking to so-and-so. They're really needing something that looks like this or this service or this thing. That's what this job is about, right? So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about social working. It's cool, right? This is why this training is so long too, right? Because we're going to teach you basically kind of what you need to know in order to do this work effectively from the beginning. And then you're going to learn all kinds of other stuff as you go along. So no matter how long this training is, you're probably going to feel like it's not enough and I need more. So, but that's what happens when you're working with families in crisis. So anyway, welcome everyone to the training. And let's go back to the slide deck here. All right, let's talk about some group norms and ground rules for this training. Number one, show up on time and come prepared. It's that simple, right? If there's homework, do it and show up at 10. I will start these trainings promptly at 10 every morning, maybe 10:01, but same thing in the evening class too. I'll start right at 5:30. Don't be late. And if you promise me you won't be late, I promise you we will not go beyond noon or 7:30 at all. I've done probably 30 or 40 or 50 of these trainings by now. I can think of 2 times where I went to 12:01 or 12:03 or 7:31 or 7:33. And that is because somebody asked a really juicy question at 11:59 that I couldn't just let it go. So I promise you, you will get out of here on time. I am not one of those teachers that like stay here and listen to me until I'm done. Nope. Once that bell rings, you guys are free to go. So to speak. So show up on time so that we have the full 2 hours together. Stay mentally and physically present. Try to keep your cameras on as much as possible. I get it. We all have bad hair days. I am experiencing one today. However, like try to keep your camera on as much as possible. I hate teaching into the void, the blackness that is like people's boxes. So put yourself in a position where you can keep your camera on. Believe it or not, I actually have you all up on the screen so that I can pay attention to facial expressions and things like that. That lets me know if my jokes are landing or if they're not. Because it's 30 hours, guys. Like we're gonna be in this together. So I like to see smiles and I like to elicit smiles every once in a while I'm talking. So if you can keep your cameras on, I get it. Sometimes you got to shut them off. That's cool too. I don't mind, but as much as you can. 3, stay on task and on topic. This is really particular in these small groups. Okay. We're going to be doing a lot of breakout groups throughout this training. Please don't do that common Zoom thing where I put you in the breakout room and then you spend half the time waiting for somebody to talk first. Jump in with both feet, right? Just start talking because I fully expect that's where most of the learning happens. When you're talking through things, when you're talking with others, you're, doing all of that. So jump in there and start working. I wish I had more time to keep you guys in the small groups, but normally I'm giving you like 8 minutes, right? So if you're spending 2 or 3 minutes figuring out who's going to talk, that's a lot of lost opportunity for you to talk and listen and experience. So when you get into those small groups, don't sit around and be like, what did he ask us to do? Like, don't do that. Jump in and start talking. Also in the small groups, let everyone participate, especially in the small groups. So usually what I'm thinking when I give you a small group, like I set the size, right? So if I'm putting you in groups of 5 and I give you 10 minutes, that means you get about 2 minutes of airtime each, right? And so a couple of things that I want you to do in order to facilitate your small group participation. If you are an introvert, well, let me start with the extroverts first. If you're an extrovert and you find yourself talking a lot, that might be a cue to you to be like, I need to pass the mic. So I'm going to ask somebody who hasn't talked to share their opinion. If you're an introvert, use that opportunity and just don't sit there thinking, I'm going to listen, right? Like jump in there. The other thing, introverts, I want you to know about the extroverts. I feel your pain. I am an introvert as well. Here's the thing I've learned about extroverts. They don't mind when you interrupt them. In fact, they fully expect it. So if they're going on and on and on, introverts, jump in there and ask them a question. Or say, I was thinking something very similar. Or, what about this? Right? Jump in there. Otherwise, the extroverts will talk for the whole 10 minutes and you don't get to say anything. So jump in there. It's fine. Number 5, listen with an open mind. I can't stress this enough. It does the kids or families no good if you hear something and your immediate response is to shut down and say, I don't think that's true. Or that's not what I believe. You need to be able to take in information and also be able to take what you've heard and report it back. If you're shutting off because you don't believe that's not part of the way that you think the world should work or whatever, you're going to have a hard time doing this job. I'm just telling you now, and chances are we might even have to say, you know what? This probably isn't a good fit for you. It's that important. And you'll see as we come up to some of these topics, some people are like, I don't think that's the way the world should work, and I don't believe it that way. That doesn't belong here, right? We have to be able to accommodate everybody and everything that's going on out there, and we have to be able to put that information in front of the court. I would ask that if you find yourself thinking, I don't like this, ask yourself where that thought is coming from. Why do I believe this? And do that work on your own. You don't need to share it with the whole group. 6, ask for clarification. I'm going to be throwing a whole bunch of stuff at you. So if there's something that you don't know or you don't get or you don't understand, please raise your hand and say, could you go back a minute? Like, I do not mind that at all, because I guarantee chances are if you're having that thought, somebody else is also having that thought. So I don't mind asking if you have a question for if you need something clarified. Please, that's how we learn. 7, participate in each other's learning. There will be no class valedictorian of the 2025 June Guardian Ad Litem training. Help each other, right? Somebody's not understanding something, help them understand it, right? Participate in each other's learning. Help each other learn, understand, especially in those small groups. Talk about that. If there's still an issue, when you come back out, ask me. right? But help each other learn. I'll tell you right now, I am not using the manual, right? Like I've just got my slide deck that I'm going through. They're all in the manual, and people will be like, "What page are you on, Ryan?" I'll be like, "I have no idea." So somebody tell them and help them. And then finally, check in with your local program staff throughout this training. I can't stress this enough. If your program is having like, hey, some of the programs have like weekly check-ins, jump in on those. Because what I'm giving you is this but this high level overview of the way that we think the state should work in all 39 counties. Guess what? It doesn't. And it's the way that it's structured. Each court is its own, depending on who you ask and how pissed off, but each court is its own little fiefdom, and the judge decides what goes on in their court, right? So while I'm trying to teach you these broad concepts, the practical application is going to look a little bit different in every county, right? And sometimes it's going to look a little bit different between courtrooms in that county. That's why it's important for you to check in with your local program and staff and say, hey, Ryan said this in training. How do we do it here in Whitman County? Or how do we do it here in Spokane County, right? So having that opportunity to talk with your local people, that's great. Those are the people you're going to be working with, not me. I do this training and then I probably will never see you again, right? Your local people are the ones that you're going to have a lot of interaction with and communication with. So check in with them. They're your boss, not me. Any clarifications needed about these ground rules or group norms? Are there any rules or norms that you need in order for this to be a successful training for you? Is there anything you can think of that you may need? Accommodations, anything? Well, if there is, by all means, feel free to ask, and we will do our best to try to make that happen for you. So, you ready to start? Okay. What is dependency? You'll hear this term, this is what we call it, the dependency system, the system, child welfare. So, dependency is, Child Protective Services, CPS, files a dependency petition with the court if it believes that the child has been abused or neglected or is at risk of harm and must be removed from the mother and or father's care in order to protect the child. So when we use the term dependency, that does not mean chemical dependency. Even though most of our parents are chemically dependent, that's not where we get the term dependency from. What that means is that the child in the case is dependent on the state for its protection rather than their caregivers. So when we say dependency or the dependency system, what we're actually saying is that the child, for whatever reason, can't rely on their parents to provide safety. And they're relying on the quote unquote state to provide that protection instead. So let's talk about how families end up in this dependency system. So we'll start over here at the right side. And this is a very messy flow chart. And you will find that when social workers make flow charts, they are very messy. Social workers are from Venus and attorneys are from Mars. I stand by that concept. But here's what happens. Somebody calls in the child abuse hotline, right? You guys have all heard that, I'm sure, at some point. Somebody call CPS, call CPS. That's how it starts. Somebody calls in and says, hey, I think this child is being abused or neglected, or I think there's something going on at that, anyway, just some kind of allegation. At the other end of that phone call is a social worker whose job it is to respond to these calls. And so they have a couple of things that they're looking for to see if there's enough information available to move forward. So first couple of things. So now we're in these greenish, bluish boxes. First thing they're looking for, is there actionable information here, right? So for example, let's say that you go to a farmer's market and while you're there, you see somebody slapping their child or yelling at them, and it just makes you feel uneasy, right? That's not good parenting. That's not what should be happening. And you don't do anything, but then you get home and you're talking to your spouse or somebody or your pet, and you're like, you know what? That's not right. I need to do something about that. I'm going to call CPS. So you call CPS and say, you know what? Hey, hi. I was at this farmer's market a couple of hours ago in Seattle, and I saw this thing, and it doesn't feel right. Well, the first thing that social worker is going to ask is, do you know the names of the people? No, sorry. It was just a thing I saw. Okay. If they're patient, maybe they'll ask, well, what farmer's market? Where were you? Okay. But do you see how that doesn't meet that level of investigation? And they get phone calls like that all the time. Just I saw something and it doesn't make me feel right. So that's one thing that they're screening out. The next thing is is this even something that we could get involved in? Right? That's the second question that they're listening to. You'd be surprised how often CPS is used in family law cases, right? Where grandma's I didn't get invited to the birthday party, and so therefore I think something's going on that's kind of sinister. Could you guys go send somebody out there to check on them and see what's going on? You see how that, and so the social worker is going to be that, what they're listening for is this kid in danger, right? Is there something really bad going on, especially these days? They don't just send people out anymore to just go randomly knock on doors and say, hey, somebody called and said that they think you're abusing your kid. It's got to be a little bit more substantial than that. So that's the other thing that they're screening out, right? Is this a legitimate thing, or is this even something that we can take action on? Another one might be a teacher or somebody calling in and saying, hey, I've been noticing that Johnny's been showing up. It's -10 outside and he's just been wearing a light jacket. The department's going to say, that's not what we do. That's not child abuse. That kid needs a coat. And then finally, they're listening for, is the child in immediate danger? Right? So that's that kind of hi, I'm the next door neighbor. I'm hearing blood curdling screams coming from the kid, next door. Or it could be anybody police or law enforcement showing up and saying, hey, mom's passed out, or hey, we got to take mom to jail. What do we do? This kid, we got to do something immediately. So that's the other thing that they're listening for as well. Now, all of those things, it's not just, are we listening and then, okay, then go run to the court and file the petition if we suspect something's going on. What they do instead is they come down to this pink layer. And what that social worker is doing and thinking is there a way that we can help this family or assist this family without necessarily taking it to court? Right? And what we call these interventions are family alternative response, or FAR. And basically what that is that person, writes all this down, and then they'll send out another social worker to go knock on the door, investigate, and see what we can do to help, see what the department can do to help. It might be offering them a service. It might be giving them something that they need. But the idea is, before we take this very drastic court intervention, is there something that we can do maybe that would just help them so that we don't start this very long court process? That's called FAR. Sometimes that results in like a voluntary service agreement, right? Where the department will say, here, we'll give you this, just sign this contract saying that you're going to go. Now, sometimes families will be like, gee, thanks, that is just the thing I needed. Other times, they'll be like, gee, thanks, and then crumple that up as soon as the social worker shuts the door. And then we might get another phone call and things like that. So the other thing that may happen is, so we offer these services, or the department offers these services, and then we ask, were they successful or not? Are we still getting referrals? If it worked, great. We'll close the case. They'll close the case and move on. Sometimes they won't work. And then that is where the department may be more likely to say, all right, these parents aren't listening. They're not doing the thing to keep their kids safe. So we're going to ask the court to intervene. And the long and the short of that process is basically the department will file a dependency on the child if there are conditions in which the child is unsafe and they can't get the parents to do what they need to do in order to provide a safe environment. So what they'll file is this thing called a dependency petition. And that's what starts this whole court ball rolling. And what's in that dependency petition is basically saying, Your Honor, the parents aren't listening to us, and they're not keeping their kids safe. Here's how we know this. What do you think? And once that petition is filed, so it could be the result of, we tried this and that didn't work, or it could be like, oh my gosh, we got to jump in there immediately. Something really bad is happening. We're going to file an immediate petition, get this whole thing into court. This red line is what separates CPS from the court process. And it all starts with that dependency petition. Generally speaking, the only people who file a court petition for this process is the department. So it is very rare and very unusual where this process isn't initiated by the department, DCYF, Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And chances are you aren't ever going to see one of those cases. We get them, but they're really, really rare. All of this stuff that's happening that I just explained to you, that process, that all happens before we get involved. Sorry, I just bumped my table. That all happens before we get involved. This cloud of stuff that's going on, that is just the social worker working with the family. We do not investigate CPS referrals. We, as advocates, do not get involved until that court petition is filed. The reason I tell you all of this is because some of you are going to get cases where they have been in this cloud for a very long time. And you're going to be thinking, why were they waiting so long? This is dumb. Why did we give the family so many opportunities? And anyway, you will get all this history when you get your case assigned to you. And I'm just telling you, we are going through a transition phase in dependency land right now. There are those that think that court involvement is bad for families. There are those that think it's okay. But anyway, we're still settling all this stuff out. So you may get a case and you'll just be like, oh my gosh, why didn't we get involved sooner? This is ridiculous. Well, welcome to modern child welfare. It used to be when we get something, when the department would get something that was really bad, they just go straight to court. Now they're trying to figure out, do we need to go to court? Should we go to court? Why do we need court? So, questions about this cloud of Child Protective Services? Okay. Well, let's talk about how frequently this happens. And I'm going to start with the most recent stats. I'm going to start with 2024. So, in 2024, the department got 131,000 requests for intervention. This is just in Washington. And this is just over the course of the year. Of that 131,000, 118 were calls to that hotline saying, hey, we've got an abuse and neglect situation going on, or we think there is. So think about that for a moment. 118,000 separate phone calls that DCYF in Washington State received last year. Now, that doesn't mean 118,000 kids, but it just means 118,000 phone calls. Of that 118,000, I'm just going to round it down to 100,000. 41,000 screened in, meaning, yeah, there's something here. Remember those three peers like farmers market, relatives? 76,000 screened out. We just didn't have enough information. Or that doesn't meet a service that we can provide or something that we can do. But 41,000 did screen in, meaning something had needed to happen. Of that 41,000, 20,000, so about 50-50, half went where they sent out a social worker to go knock on the door and see what's wrong. The other half was like, oh, could we offer you a service? The kinder, gentler CPS investigation. So half got a door knocking. The other half was like, could we offer you a service to fix your family's problems? Of both of those tracks, 21,000, so half said, yeah, we could use a service, whether they were forcibly given a service through the court process or voluntarily accepted a service. You with me so far? Cool. Of that 21,000, only about 3,000 is where the kid was placed somewhere other than their original home. That too could be voluntary. Hey, why don't you go live with grandma while your parents are figuring out whatever needs to go on? Or, hey, we're going to put you in foster care, right? Because you don't have a relative around that can do this. So 3,000 were placed. And of that 3,000, basically, the court was petitioned to get involved. I want to say right around that number. So we have about 3,000 dependency filings, 3,000 new open filings with the court involvement each year. And that could either be because the department, they knocked on the door and it was like, whoa, somebody, this is a horribly dangerous situation. We need to get this kid out of here. Or, Your Honor, we've been working with this family and they're still not doing the stuff that we need them to do. Some of you may have been wondering, or you may have heard, oh, remember COVID? Although we're getting way past the remember COVID. But one of the things that you might have read in the newspapers because that's what we were all doing, is just reading stuff. But oh my gosh, who's going to make all these phone calls? There's going to be this epidemic of child abuse that's happened once we are all out of lockdown because teachers aren't seeing the kids, blah, blah, whatever reason. Everybody's in their house. There's going to be all these horrible things that are happening. Not really. The numbers are about the same. About 100,000 phone calls, 100,000 regret, right? So like that whole myth that kids weren't getting seen or that we were all going to come out of lockdown and there were going to be all these horrible things that happened to kids because they were being abused, neglected at home. Nope. Questions about these numbers or thoughts? Anyone?
Yes.
Go ahead, Melody.
Is there a breakdown or statistics or whatever that breaks this down into counties? Like which county had X amount of calls, etc.?
Yes. But I've seen them, Melody. I don't have them off the top of my head.
Well, of course, being from the east side of the state, we don't have any. It's all got to be in Seattle, right?
Oh, totally. Totally,
Okay.
totally. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Thanks
it's all Seattle.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Well, I have some county specific numbers when we talk about demographics and stuff like that, Melody. But when it comes to CPS referrals and kind of what they're being referred to, I'll just say this too. The department sucks at giving us numbers. I mean, I'm sure anybody that's done any, like, you ask them for one thing, they give you another. It doesn't make any sense, or like, you just know. Anyway, so the court's a little bit better, but not much. All right, so let's talk about statutorily. What does it mean to be a dependent child? So there are 4 buckets of kids for dependency. There's 4 ways that kids can get into this system. You only have to worry about 2 of them and really only 1. But a dependent child means any child who has A, been abandoned, right? So these are situations where parents, you probably have seen these in libraries and fire stations and hospitals even, that says safe place, those little placards. That means it's a place you can take your kid, drop them off, and then walk away. And say, you know what, I don't have the capability of parenting this kid, stuff like that. We don't put you on those cases because those are pretty easy. And we don't need you going around and investigating. It's just like, so those are kind of fast-tracked, right? The parents basically surrender their parental rights, and then we try to find a family that's willing to adopt at that point. It does not happen that often. Like, it's rare. So that's type A. Type B and type C sound relatively the same. So I'm going to ask you to put your attorney hat on as we read both of these definitions. See if you can tell me the difference. A type B dependency is where a child is abused or neglected as defined by whatever statute by a person legally responsible for the care of the child. A type C is saying or alleging that the child has no parent, guardian, or custodian capable of adequately caring for the child, such that the child is in circumstances which constitute a danger of substantial damage to the child's psychological or physical development. Sorry, period. Can either of you discern the difference between B and C? And what do you think it is? Anyone?
It sounds like in B, the parents are the ones who are causing the harm, but in C, parents or guardians, or somebody is harming the child, but in C, it's the circumstances.
That's close. Yeah. B is basically saying the parents did something. right? They intentionally did something. C is like, hey, to your point, Becky, the circumstances is not making this a very safe environment for the kid. The reason I say this doesn't really matter to us, because the attorneys love to argue these two things back and forth. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference. So you can imagine if you were representing parents in this situation, you don't want to admit that the parent, you don't want to admit, or you don't want your client admitting to abusing or neglecting their child. But type C, well, they have circumstances that are preventing them from doing, raising their child in the right way. That's way different. So, but for us, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I tell you this is because, especially when you're first on a case, you'll see the attorneys. So you'll have the state's attorney, the social worker's attorney, and the parents' attorneys arguing with each other about whether it's a type B or a type C. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't. For what we're looking for and how we're going to be proceeding on with the case. And we'll explain that when we talk about the court process, probably tomorrow. We might get to it today, though. The final type is D. And that is a circumstance is a child is receiving extended foster care. So it used to be in Washington State, probably about 15, 20 years ago, that if you were 18 and in foster care, your social worker would visit you on your 18th birthday and say, congratulations, you're an adult. Have fun. Sorry that you had crappy parents. Sorry that we were crappy parents, but we're done with you. You're 18. You're an adult now. So we found and successfully lobbied Congress and in both Washington and the other Washington that kids, especially foster kids, need a little bit of a longer runway and a place to come back to. Right? So they created this program called extended foster care. And what that is, it allows a kid who's turned 18 to say, I need to go back into foster care. I want to go back into foster care, right? I'm in college and I need a place to come home to over the summers. I work and I'm not ready to live out on my own yet. I don't have the resources to do that. Can I please come back into foster care, sign myself back in so that I can finish cooking, so to speak. You will not be appointed on type D cases because that kid's an adult and they can advocate for themselves. They don't need you doing that. And they also get an attorney to represent what they need, right? So that the attorney can fight for it. Basically, legally, they're an adult, so we can't do it. Now, some of you may be saying, but I've been this only, or I'll hear this all the time. But I've been this child's advocate for the past 8 years. They need me. And I didn't used to say this, but I do say this now. If you were this kid's advocate for the past 8 years, what the hell were you doing? That is a failure on your part. They don't need you anymore. Right? You had 8 years to figure this out. What are you going to add to the conversation? Anyway, I'm being a little bit rough, but it is something like we're trying to figure out how to get this kid so that they're not dependent on the state. Like, that's your job. I don't want to hear how you've been on a case for 8 years. That's kind of a failure. Just saying it, because nobody else will. We like to give awards to people who have been on these cases for a really long time to show their commitment. I would rather give awards to people that got in there, got this kid what they needed and out in a year. Like, those are the ones that we should be celebrating, not the ones that have been doing this forever. So anyway. Questions about these statutes?
How old can someone be whenever they receive their extended foster care? Like, what age does that go up to?
Up to 22, there's been some basic, so 4 years, there's been some talk about expanding that to 25. That hasn't gone anywhere, especially in the state legislature. We have no money to be able to do that. So, and the other thing, when this bill first came into practice, it used to be that on your 18th birthday, you had to decide. And if you said no, we were done. Well, as you can imagine, a lot of 18-year-olds, when they turn 18, are like, peace out, yo, I am done. And then they go spend 3 or 4 months, trying sleeping on couches and figuring things out. And then they come back and like, I made a mistake. Could I please come back? Or, and then we used to say, nope. But now we've said, no, that's dumb. Of course they can come back. So up until you're 22, Jordan. All right. For this next part, I'm not trying to say that you're wrong, but I just want to get a sense of kind of where everybody is in terms of why do you think kids end up in dependency court? Like what's going on? So I'm going to ask you a series of questions about types of abuse. In the chat, I just want you to put in what you think your guess is in terms of what % of these cases involve this particular bullet point that I'm going to read. This is not to see if you're right or wrong. It's just for you to kind of put into practice, what do I think? Why are all these kids in this system? And don't worry about it adding up to 100%. I'm not going to be keeping track. And not only that, most of our families and kids have multiple issues of these that we're going to be talking about. So, all right. So the first one, what % of the cases do you think involve physical abuse of the children or of the child? Put it in chat. Excellent. Next category, sexual abuse of the child. What % of the cases do you think involve sexual abuse of the child? Next category, chronic neglect of the child, meaning the parents are being neglectful of their parenting responsibilities in terms of raising the child. Next category, substance abuse of one or more of the parents. What % of the cases do you think involve substance abuse of the parents? Okay. What about mental health issues of the parent? What % of the cases involve some kind of mental health issue with the caregiving parent? They do absolutely, Joanna, overlap a lot. What about extreme behavior of the child? I can't control this child. What % of those cases? Okay. And then finally, what about homelessness or inadequate housing? All right, you guys ready for the real answers? here's what we can find. And also, remember what I was telling you about how awful the department is at keeping stats and statistics? So these percentages are driven by like historical averages. But overall, it gives you a sense of kind of what we're dealing with here. So they're not like scientific, but they're close enough. Physical abuse, only about 15% of the cases. Right? So where there are allegations of physical abuse, it's only about 15%. That's not the main reason people call CPS these days. I know back when I was growing up, I'm a Gen Xer, right? Like that was the whole thing. Oh, CPS, if you spank me, mom, I'm going to call CPS or somebody's going to call. Like that's not why CPS is called these days. As a society, I actually think this is a good thing. As a society, we've really shunned abusing children. And that kind of, response has paid off. Kids don't get beat as much as they used to. And that's a good thing. Doesn't mean it's gone completely. We still have about 15%, but 15% or so is about where that number is. And even you'd be surprised, especially with our cases too. I should say this because I forgot to. Remember that big funnel chart? The families that we are working with, we are literally dealing with like the worst 1 or 2% of all families in Washington. So there used to be this prevailing notion, like when the economy went bad or when things bad, that were affecting the general population went bad, oh my gosh, our numbers were going to spike. That's not what happens. The families that we're working with were already really in a bad state. And so like fluctuations in the economy or the jobless, homeless, like those aren't the families that we're working with. We're dealing with that like worst of the worst of the worst. So that's why these numbers stay relatively consistent. We don't see huge variations in all of these categories. And I'll explain with each category why. Sexual abuse of the child. What I want to say about this one in particular is that this is at the hands of or the doing of the sexual abuse is happening because the parents are the one doing it. Right? Not that it may not be happening elsewhere, but when we're talking about dependency, this is why that number thankfully is low. Right? It's only about 4%. And that's where there are allegations that one or more of the parents are doing it or allowing it to happen. But those are pretty low. Chronic neglect makes up the biggest percentage of our cases these days. And when we say chronic neglect, what that means is it's a parent's inability to keep their kids safe for whatever reason. They are neglecting their parental responsibilities. And neglect looks different depending on the kid. Really simply, chronically neglecting a 6-month-old is way different than chronically neglecting a 16-year-old. And our system is finally catching up to that idea. It used to be that if one of the kids in this family were being neglected, like the 6-month-old, then we take the whole lot of them and put them in foster care. And then wonder why. Anyway, and then wonder why these kids were behaving the way that they were. We are getting way better at refining, and the department in particular is getting way better at defining, okay, why does this kid need to come into care? Like, what is the specific safety concern that we're worried about as to why this child needs this very drastic intervention of having them go live with somebody else? So, chronic neglect is more of a safety threat to younger kids. It just makes sense. And this is also why most of the kids that we're going to be working with are younger. Substance abuse of one or more parents. I know this says 45%. That cannot be true. And I've showed this because this was the stat that like the department was floating out there. No. Consider it a rarity if you get a case where at least, or consider it a rarity if substance abuse does not show up in your case. It's at least 75 to 85% of these families that we're working with have substance abuse issues. You will also notice that I did not include mental health concerns of the parent. Do you know why? Because most of our parents are self-medicating. And we'll go into greater detail as to why that is, or, basically what's triggering all that, but that's what's happening. Substance abuse and mental health disorders are co-occurring, right? Many of our parents turn to substances to cope. And again, we'll explain more about that, why that is later. But extreme behavior of the child is only about 3% of the cases. And the reason for that is because we have other systems to help with that, or we did. But, right, so these are the types of court cases in particular where if the kid's behavior is the one causing the problems, we have things like a youth at risk petition, right? Or a CHINS petition, child in need of services. There's other ways that the court can handle that. That's not a failure of the parents, usually. It's just the kid's got some issues that we need help figuring out. Dependency is not that system. Taking a kid that has those issues and putting them in foster care, guess what? That doesn't fix anything. And so the state is aware of that. And so if we've got a kid that's not behaving, dependency is not the place for them, at least in our system in Washington. Now, other states, they do use foster care and those sorts of things, but those are typically the foster care systems where they're basically running big orphanages or like facilities where they put a whole bunch of kids in, right? Kind of under sort of semi-lockdown types of situations. We don't do that in Washington. Dependency is mainly for safety issues, where kids can't be safe because of their parents. Now, sometimes we keep cases open for that extreme behavior, like if we've got a kid that loves to run away from placement. But part of what I'm also going to be telling you in this training is foster care doesn't fix things. In fact, it usually makes things worse for kids. And it's only been recently that we've asked, actually all of us in the system, been asking ourselves that question, right? Is foster care this thing that we think is as good as it should be? And we're going to be spending a lot of time exploring that concept throughout this training and giving you tools to actually be able to critically analyze whether or not that's what this kid needs. And then the last category is homelessness or inadequate housing. And here's why this number is as high and as low as it is. If homelessness is the only issue facing a family, that in and of itself is not child abuse or neglect. That is actually written into our state statute. If the only issue is homelessness or inadequate housing, that is not enough of a reason to file a dependency. You can still be homeless or have inadequate housing and still provide safety for your children. Make sense? Okay. So that is why when you hear about these big raids of home, at least over here in Seattle, but I don't know, I think they're happening everywhere now. Like where they go and raid the encampments or, kick them off of one thing and bring law enforcement in to say you're not allowed to be here anymore. We don't get a whole bunch of kids coming into the system at that point. That's not the issue. Now, it is a reason sometimes, however, why we don't close the cases fast enough. Because let's imagine you're on Section 8 housing, right? Government subsidized housing for you and your kids. And you develop an addiction problem. And, CPS is called, we file a dependency petition. Guess what's the first thing that happens to you as a parent when you're on Section 8 housing with your kids? Guess what happens?
You lose your housing.
You lose your housing. And then let's say you successfully get clean through this process. You got to go back on that waiting list. And so we'll keep these cases open because basically we're not going to put a family into homelessness just because we're done with the court process. And see, this is a good example of one of those situations where I don't know what the answer is, but I went let's think critically about this. You're going to have people that say, well, if you're abusing drugs, you should lose your housing. Right? We've got this whole wait list of families that are waiting to get on that, to get that housing. So, and we've got a shortage of housing available. So let's get the people who quote unquote deserve to get that housing, right? Let's give them that housing since you messed up. But then we create another problem on the back end saying, now what do we do with this family, right? They've done all the work. Should they get to the front of the queue? Like, see, once you start thinking about this stuff, it's like, should they get to the front of the queue? Right? Because they're clean now and hopefully they won't get clean and we can exit them out. Like these are the types of issues that I'm talking about, guys. So, in summary, 50% of all cases involve some sort, at least, it's way higher than that. 50% of all cases involve some form of parental substance abuse or mental health issue. And like we were saying, the impact of that neglect is higher, has a higher safety threat to younger kids. That's why you see younger kids coming into our system. The other thing, I'll just say this too, having been in this for 25 years, the drugs don't matter. I know many of you have probably heard of the fentanyl crisis. That's great. Before that, it was the meth crisis. Before that, it was the crack crisis. Like, the drugs aren't what's the problem, right? Like, they have specific impacts, but the issue is basically substance abuse, and that's what's preventing them from giving their kids a safe environment. Like we said, only 15% of the case involve physical abuse, and less than 5%, thankfully, involve sexual abuse of the child at the caregivers. Yeah. We have about 3,000 kids that enter this system every year in Washington State alone. It used to be higher. It used to be lower. Again, we're still trying to figure out how many kids should we have in this system. For the longest time when I first started this job, it was around 4,000-5,000 each year. Like, that just seemed to be like, this is how many families we can work with. It's been going down, and then it's been slowly going back up over the past 5 years to around 3,000 per year. And that's just in Washington State. So that's 3,000 newish, because we do get some kids that come back in, but 3,000 kids each year that we're working with. Over the course of, at any given moment, there are about 6,000 kids in the system, meaning they have an active open case. So this is why you hear different numbers. And then it's around 8,000 or so over the course of a year. So this is to give you an idea and a scope of the problem. Michelle, did you have a question? Oh, I just saw this, thought maybe it was a hand. Well, let's talk about demographics then. Connie, thank you for successfully predicting the next slide. All right. Sorry, I don't have 2024 numbers, but you can see there's not much drastic difference. So these are all the new cases entering each year, right? So these are petitions filed. And as you can see, almost a third of the kids, of the new cases coming in, are babies. Makes sense, right? They're the most vulnerable in terms of needing help with their caregivers aren't able to do that. And if you go all the way up to just 0 to 5, so birth to 5, that's almost 2/3 of all the cases. We've got a couple, 12 to 17-year-olds that kind of sneak in there. But most of the kids are babies. Gender, there's no real big difference there. These are all not statistically significant, but 50-50 between female and male. Now, we're going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive in this particular category. Racial demographics. Here on the right are the general demographics of all the kids in the state, right? So all kids under 18. 1% Native, 9% Asian and Pacific Islander, 4% Black, 21% Hispanic, 56% white, 8% two or more races. Over here is what it looks like across the state. So Asian, American Indian or American Native. 3% of all the kids coming in are Native, compared to only 1% of the general population of kids. Where that's a multiracial component, where Native, being part Native American, 12%. And it's only 8% for any mixture of races for kids coming in, or for kids in the general population. So what we're looking at here, and what this idea that I want to introduce to you, is this idea of disproportionality, meaning that the kids in our system, the racial demographics, look way different than what they do in the general population. Just kind of going down the list, 1% Asian Pacific Islanders in our system compared to 9%. And there's all kinds of reasons, and we're going to be exploring these reasons as to why eventually, but probably not right now. This is just to kind of expose you to the fact that, yes, this disproportionality actually exists. Yeah, Hispanic, Latino, 18% compared to 21%. And Black, 5% compared to 4%. But if you add up all the different races, the multi-categories, so you got 12, 20, so 12 plus 8 is 20%, another 22%, plus 4. Let's say roughly a quarter of the kids coming into this dependency system are multiracial, compared to just 8% of the general population. And where'd she go? Melody, I just want to let you know that we're just not all counting all the Seattle kids. That's where all the multiracial kids are. So I say that jokingly, but what I want to show you, go ahead, Melody, sorry.
Thank you.
Let's see here. I actually have a list of all the counties. As soon as I find it. Here we go. Chat. There it is. Okay. here are the local stats so that you can do a county by county breakdown. And we'll look at that a little bit here too. Is there anybody that's curious about their county? Shout it out.
Whitman County.
Do I have Whitman? It's been so long since we've had a volunteer from Whitman, I may not have done it. I did. Yay. Okay. So the way to read this is this number here is how many filings. So this should actually be 2024. All right. Whitman. So here's your general population, right? 1%, 7% of the kids. But look at the numbers here. 9% of the cases involved a Black family. 55 white compared to 75% in the general population. But these are the other. 27% of the kids are multiracial compared to only 6% in the general population. And for those of you that think, oh, you know, like, I hear this too. We don't have any people of color in my county, or like, it's very small. Great. How would you like to be that one Black family in Whitman County? Chances are you're going to have a dependency filing on you. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's what we're talking about when we talk about disproportionality. Who else? Oh, somebody said, yeah, let's look at Spokane. Here we go. 7% of your population are Native American kids compared to only 2% of the filings. But looky here. 78% of the people kids in Spokane are white compared to only 50% in the general population. And again, that discrepancy comes when we start looking at multiracial kids. Almost a third of all the kids in dependency are multiracial in Spokane. Connie?
When I was doing it, I did it for 5 years, and from 2008 to 2013. And I know that we had a couple of cases of Native American out on the reservation, but those were so tricky because the tribe primarily has the say. Is that still the case?
Yep. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about ICWA next week.
Okay.
Oh, let's look at Clallam. Kat? Again, 12% of the cases are Native American, kids with Native American, compared to only 2% of the general population. Yeah. Multiracial, double. And I know the numbers are small, but remember, those filings are just the new cases, right? You've got all of these other cases that are still back there. And guess what? The disproportionality only gets worse. Because once they get into our system, it's hard to get out. And so you get this like backlog of like, so the numbers are only worse if you're looking at actual open cases in terms of disproportionality. Now, I also want to say, I'm not showing you these to kind of slap people on the wrist and say it's bad. There are a variety of reasons as to why kids come into our system and why these numbers are the way that they are. I'm not trying to blame and shame anyone. I think, you know, in the department and all of us are all working and really doing why are the families of color staying in our system longer? Why are they more likely to come in here? We're all doing that analysis. I tell you this so that you are aware of the families you're going to be working with. Right? Cowlitz County, again, kind of all over the board, a little bit better. So 7% of all kids are multiracial compared to, is that 20%? 1 out of every 5 kids? And again, I know 3% doesn't seem like that large of a number, but 3% compared to 1%? These are the things that we find even in the smaller communities. And so when I hear people say, I don't need to worry about that because we don't have that many Black or we don't have that many Hispanic families in my population, I'm like, yeah, but that, again, that 1 or 2 families, they're in your system. So that doesn't count. Anybody else want to have me pick on their county? I say this very confidently because they're all bad. Just so.
Can we look at Clark County, please?
Absolutely.
Hey, Ryan, real quick, where are you getting your numbers from? Who's reporting them? Are they?
Okay, so that's the other thing we'll talk about too.
Okay.
So Clark just as bad, right? 8% compared to 17%, about double. So these numbers come from the court. So Julie, they come from the interactive data report thing that Matt Orm does. Anyway, so, and these demographics are coming from the social worker reporting the race of the child. There for a while back in the early 2000s, there was a big emphasis on, reducing the number, as particularly Black children and Native American children in our system. And so there was this little bit of a gap where we were like, hey, the Black kids are coming down, right? Like it's coming down, down, down. Do you know or the Native American kids, the numbers, these numbers on this far left column, like they're coming down, we're doing something, it's working. What we're really finding is that no, it's just more multiracial kids now. That those discrepancies and disproportionality that we thought maybe we were doing something that was fixing it, nope. It's just now that we're seeing more multiracial couples than we used to, or more multiracial parenting than we used to. So we're not quite done. It's also why it's very difficult for us to say, it used to be too, right? Like when you would fill out your census or your census surveys or whatever, you just put like whatever you were, however you identified. We're getting much more sophisticated about that now, right? We don't just have the 5 racial categories. And if you don't fit in one of those 5, then you're white or you're Black, right? Like that's not how we do it anymore. There's a lot more nuance to it. It's also why it's a lot more your work is going to be a lot more nuanced as well, right? Because you may have a kid whose mom is white and whose dad is African American or vice versa. And navigating that looks differently. There's not just like, this is what we do with Black families, this is what we do with white families, this is what we do with Native families, right? There's way more into it than that, especially when it comes to the kids. Because they're going to be a combination of both, right? And they're going to have influences on both. And so this is why it gets tricky, and it's why we want to bring it up right from day one. Race is not something that you can ignore when it comes to being a child. So all this is to say is that chances are you're going to be advocating for a very young child whose parents probably have substance abuse issues and who are a different race than you. Welcome to child welfare and welcome to child dependency, everyone. So this is what we're going to be doing a lot of deeper diving into, like looking at all of these things and explaining some of the things, what services and things like that. But just so you know, you're going to be advocating for a baby or, a very young child who's probably going to be racially different than you are, whose parents have a substance abuse issue that they're trying to fix. Sound like fun? Cool. All right. I'm going to let you go 2 minutes early today because we did the work that we needed to do. Take those 2 minutes and review your county stats. But otherwise, I will see you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.